Welcome to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
I would like to welcome all of you to a very special program. We're taping today's program on the national holiday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., national and an Idaho state holiday. Something else that's very special for us today and is very appropriate on this national holiday. This is the 900th taping of the North Idaho College TV Public Forum. This is our 19th year, and each time we hit a 100 mark, we think it is a special day for this broadcast. And we have a very special guest to honor Dr. King and also to celebrate our 900th program. I welcome from Portland, Oregon, Kathleen Sadat. Ms. Sadat is the assistant to Portland City Commissioner Gretchen Kalfer, who is one of the commissioners in the city of Portland, and she recently left a position Kathleen did as Director of Affirmative Action for the state of Oregon, and she held this position most of the time under Governor Neil Goldschmidt. She has a long list of credentials. She is also the former representative for Governor Goldschmidt on the board of directors of the Northwest Coalition Against Malicious Harassment. She also was a biochemistry research lab staff person for 10 years at Washington University Medical School in St. Louis, Missouri. She also was manager of the Portland, Oregon CETA program for over 9 years. She also was youth services director of the Portland, Oregon chapter of the Urban League. She was night school supervisor of the Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center, and she serves as a member of the Oregon State University Board of Visitors for Minority Affairs, and also a member of the board of directors of the Bradley Angle House for Battered Women in Portland. She has many interests, including children, world peace, and celebration of diversity. Kathleen, it's a pleasure to welcome you on this special day to our program.
Pleasure to be here, Tony. Thank you.
And I'm very pleased to have our regular panelists with us today to help us celebrate our 900th program. To my left is Janelle Burke, an attorney in the state of Idaho, who has been with us on this program for approximately 18 years, and she's happy to be here to celebrate this. And also the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College, Steve Shink, who joins us in the celebration. And I shall ask Janelle Burke to commence the questioning.
Welcome to our 900th program. Your list of achievements and interests are most impressive. And now I have a question for you on this national holiday. What were the goals and principles of Dr. Martin Luther King?
I think initially Dr. King started out with the goal of racial equality, and the issues were black and white. As he moved through time and through his efforts, I think he began to see some other major themes. The need for love, compassion, understanding, in a sense broader than just black and white problems. Ultimately, Dr. King was a man of peace, and he was a standard for nonviolence. And in everything that he did, he kept the issue of nonviolence before him and the issue of peace and harmony as one of his major themes. I think there are a lot of other minor themes that flow from that, but I think that's basically what he was about.
Those were the major themes. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of where we've been, can you recap a little bit where we've been and where we are today? What you think our progression has been, if any?
Okay, I think there has been progression. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho on this TV show. We are now at a place where we have a greater, more expanded dialogue around the issues of race and diversity, not simply black and white, but all the other colors of people that exist in our country. We are now beginning to talk about how to use the resources of those people as opposed to simply seeing them as clients of social service systems. These are major steps. We've accomplished a lot in terms of people having access to public accommodation. We've accomplished a fair amount in terms of access to education. However, there have been some curtailments of accessibility to education for all children regardless of color because of cutbacks in funding. Where we are is ahead of where we were, and where we are is behind where we need to be.
Can you tell us where you think we need to be? Where are we going?
We need to be at a place where we can, in fact, let go of a lot of the mechanisms that we have built to try to ensure participation. We need to understand that programs like affirmative action were techniques for getting to a greater place. That greater place being a more harmonious and diverse nation. The reasons for having that harmony and diversity is to build a true democracy, a true participatory democracy, so that people are not intimidated by the system, so that people's voices can be heard regardless of the language they speak, so that people can be seen and their needs attended regardless of skin color, regardless of age, on and on.
Steve Sheen.
Kathleen, as you look at, and you've been involved with so many of these areas, we've talked about a number of them already, as you look at some of the agenda items that people like you and others involved with the civil rights movement are still concerned with, questions about housing, access to education, hiring policy, promotion of women and minorities, and this is a bit difficult, but if you were going to pick one of those to be number one on your agenda, what would it be?
I don't know that I could do that.
They're all important.
I would say that probably the most important is jobs. If you have a job, you have hope. You have hope for educating your children. You have hope for decent housing. You also, in having hope, begin to plan for the future. You then begin to shape your children more than if you are hopeless. If you are hopeless, nothing matters. You don't invest yourself into your community or into your family in the same way. So I would say honest work is one of the most important aspects. But then that ties back to, and especially in the coming years, education. Since our workforce needs are changing and the skill levels are changing, education is going to become much more an important theme for America to consider. We cannot continue to let our children not know math and science, not understand how to think creatively, or not be able to follow directions, in addition to putting back into our culture some strong sense of worth ethic and the joy in doing honest work. So I think they all kind of blend together ultimately.
You mentioned a moment ago that on the education front we've actually regressed a little bit recently. You talked about curtailment in certain education programs. What specifically has happened that disturbs you?
It is my understanding that some of the funding for education for scholarships has been cut back.
Minority scholarships?
Minority scholarships in particular have been focused upon, but there's a general reduction in the budget for education overall, not just minorities.
Does that hit minorities hardest, do you think?
Of course. It hits the people who have the least access the hardest. Then if you're going to take away minority scholarships, then you have a whole another layer of people who are capable but will not be able to avail themselves of an education. I don't think that these are handouts. I attended school on scholarship. It was not a minority scholarship. It was at a prestigious school in Oregon, and it was never considered a handout. It was considered both a benefit to me and to the institution. It is a benefit to the future of this country that we educate the children. You cannot have a democracy if you have a group of citizens who do not know how to read and write and who cannot articulate their feelings and their ideas.
I believe that what the Department of Education did was rule that, at least in some cases, it was wrong to specifically reserve some scholarships for minorities. But I also believe that I heard that the executive branch had said, we want to take a second look at that ruling. Have you got any further information on whether or not that ruling is going to stand?
No, I don't know whether it's going to stand. I think there'll be a lot of dialogue about it. We're back at the idea of discussing reverse discrimination and what that means. Again, numerically, the people of color in this country are not able to implement a policy of reverse discrimination. We don't have the power. We don't have the numbers. So that's not the issue at all. The question for America is not just whether we will educate little black children, little brown children. It's whether we will give a quality education to all of our children so that we are competitive on a world market in terms of manufacturing, in terms of service delivery, in terms of being able to be a player at the table of the global village, which we're rapidly becoming.
As I introduced the program, Kathleen, I indicated that we're taping this program on the national holiday for Dr. King, and it'll air just a little bit later. but I have always been one of those individuals that has been such an admirer of the power that Dr. King had as a non-elected official to make major changes in this country, and oftentimes that comes from elected officials, and he had more impact than even elected officials. I'd like to give you the opportunity to talk about what causes a person like Dr. King, that comes along rarely, to have such an impact upon not only this nation, which is one of the great nation states of the world in influence, but really worldwide impact. When he talked about such things as his great communicative skills of, please do not judge me on my color or my race, but on the content of my character. Could you explain to us what brings about such a important positive force?
I think one of the things is one that you mentioned. He was not an elected official, and therefore was not worried about being reelected. He was a leader because he touched people, because he could articulate the issues. But more than that, Dr. King was aware of the fact that he held his own humanity in his own hands. He asked for recognition of that humanity, but in no way did he ever relinquish his humanity. It was his, and he chose to do with it something to show other people about how they too were human. And in doing so, I think people responded from their hearts saying the abuse of people because of skin color is a wrong thing. People picked up the cry of equality and humanity around the globe. South African people began their movement with more emphasis in response to Dr. King's leadership. So we're talking about here somebody who was a leader who put his own life on the line. He was not hiding behind any other group of people. He was not in a bureaucracy that would proscribe his behaviors. He was a leader in the true sense of the word.
He was really free, wasn't he, to follow. He made himself free to follow his principles. If I get you to react to something else in the same line of the eloquent statement you just made, there's two things come to mind that Dr. King said. He said on more than one occasion that he didn't think he'd live to be 40, and he was assassinated at age 39. I sense in that not only great commitment, determination, but great courage. The other thing that Dr. King did, he often talked about the strength that you must have to follow your convictions. Don't you think he had something that, an inner strength that so many people do not understand?
I think that he had an inner strength that people on some level demonstrate a lot every day. I think what happened to Dr. King is he was thrust into the forefront, and he became a lot of us. There were many people that worked with him. I kind of resist the idea of history as the purview of an individual. Dr. King became the symbol for the movement, but there were other people who died, who marched with and behind Dr. King, who were as committed. And it gives us hope. We don't have to wait for another Dr. King to do the things that we need to do. We may want another symbol, but we ourselves, on some level, can have the kind of commitment that this young man had and displayed. Now, once he's out there, it's very difficult to uncommit, even if you want to. I think that you could, but it would be difficult. The question of principle comes in here, and we can say he was a man of principle. He didn't uncommit. He didn't run away and say, oh, this is too scary. I have to leave now. But I think there are lots of people who've been doing that for a long, long time. They have not been the symbolic leaders. And I think there's a fear that stops people sometimes from stepping into that symbolic leadership role. And it has to do with being assassinated before you're 40.
You said in your eloquent speech, you were the keynote speaker this year at North Idaho College for King Day, and you indicated that hope was something that's essential to make that commitment and continue on. And I was really taken by the fact you said you have fleeting moments when the hope's not there and you want to go into isolation, but that's very, very temporary. Dr. King had to experience that too, because another thing that I recall from his life was that he said the longer that he was in the movement, the commitment was permanent, but as he saw more and more the seriousness and the depth of the problem, that his life went along, he got more and more concerned and was a sadder person, and he became that he had less and less happiness. So isn't it that when you get involved with trying to help the world, that it's not always going to be something that is going to be for your own self a fulfillment of happiness, but carrying that burden of others?
I'm not sure that one gets into any of this because you want to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
I think you get into it because you feel that it's necessary, and that to do less would be to feel overwhelmed. As you stay in it and you watch things happen like another war, it's very easy to feel again overwhelmed. And so you have to look for those places where you can feel a bit of control, or where you can feel I can't manage that, but I can manage this right here. I think that as you look globally, it would be easy to get overwhelmed. You know, destruction of trees, destruction of air, destruction of people, destruction of destruction. And then you come to wherever you live and you look at maybe housing, crime, drugs. It'd be really easy just to say, I can't handle any of this. I'm going to stay glued to the sitcoms and go to work and just mind my own business. I think it's very, very admirable for people to keep trying to move the systems, to keep trying to convince people, to keep trying to change minds and share ideas. And Dr. King was one of those admirable people. He just kept trying up to the end. I don't think you have to stay sad. I think you do need to stay connected. You do need to spend time with people that make you laugh. You do need to look at yourself in the perspective of history and say, well, I'm just a little blip on the screen, and I think that helps.
Janelle Burke.
Well, this has been so interesting to hear you talk about these things. I'd like to move into the area of affirmative action for a minute. Since you've worked in that area, what do you think the role of affirmative action should be?
Affirmative action is a tool, and it's only a tool, and it was never meant to, on its own and of its own, change America. The things that needed to go along with the affirmative action programs were real commitments on the part of school systems to diversify curriculum, to teach children about the other people in this land. The real commitment would have been to also encourage foreign languages as opposed to discourage foreign languages, as so many of our schools have done. Affirmative action was to go along with discussions of diversity, discussions of how you and I can work together. Instead, it's sort of been left as a program that was supposed to solve a lot of problems. That's why, as affirmative action director, anything that had to do with race was likely to prompt a call to my office, not necessarily affirmative action. I think that over time we will begin to see this again as a tool, something that needs to be used in the greater goal, as I said earlier, of diversity and participatory democracy.
Does affirmative action as a tool work?
Yes, it does.
Have there been real changes because of it?
In Oregon, in the almost 4 years that I was there were increases in all categories of protected groups. That's people of color, and each subgroup under that showed increase in hiring and increase of movement into management. Women, who by far did the best, white women, did the best in terms of getting hired and moving into management position. And the disabled, who are often left out of any kind of discussion of affirmative action. Generally, we talk about women and minorities as though it was one word, and we glump it all together, and that's all we think about. Well, in Oregon, we showed great improvements in the movement of disabled people into positions in state government and into management positions. So I think that we need to be looking at affirmative action as a tool and use it that way. I'm not sure that I answered your question.
Yes, you did. And I hear you saying that there's beauty in diversity.
Definitely. It's more fun, number one. And it provides me a chance to learn something. The idea of how many different ways people build houses or think about how to get their food or raise their children is wonderful. You know, just think about all the different ways that we have learned to survive on this planet, whether we live in ice and snow or whether we live in heat and sand.
And why do you feel that the idea is sometimes threatening? of diversity? Why do you feel that sometimes people, I think, react to diversity because they feel threatened in their own lives? Why do you think that should be?
Oh, I think it is because we are so very invested in the idea of power. We're so very invested in the idea of history as the purview of an individual, power belongs to individuals, and traditionally the power has belonged to a specific group in this country, and that's white men. I think, and in my discussions with white men, there are a number of them who are very threatened by what to them seems a diminishing of their power, as opposed to a sharing of resources. Because the issue is power, then that's why people feel threatened. If you're not worried about losing anything, you don't feel threatened. What are you losing? You're losing imagery. You're losing imagery. Some of the people of color are threatened by the idea of diversity.
But aren't people sometimes bound, if there is no diversity, aren't they sometimes bound into their own power? Isn't power sometimes the kind of thing that actually acts as a shackles?
Yes, it is. I think that if you would read Roll, Jordan, Roll by Eugene Genovese, he talks about the power of the slave during slavery times, the accountability of the slave master during slavery times. And you've heard Baldwin talk about it. Other people talk about how the slaveholder was bound just as the slave was. Yes, the idea of power is an external idea. It's an image. It is not of the heart. It is not of the spirit. So if it's taken away, then who are you? If this external idea of power and being able to control or make decisions, if that goes away, who are you? If you lose your car and your house, who are you? I mean, who wants to be that person? I want to be the person that knows who I am, whether I have a car, house, or power.
Steve Sheen.
Kathleen, I'd like to move to another area, a more current area of your responsibility. I know you're working now on the question of affordable housing for people in the Portland area. What do you think Dr. King would feel if he were here today about the plight of the poor, and particularly inner city poor? Has it gotten worse?
Oh, definitely it's gotten worse. We now have homeless people all over the country, including women and children, living on the street.
That's a fairly recent development, or are we just
over the
counting
last
them
several
better?
years? I don't think it's just counting them better. You can see them. You can go and see them. Where I used to see only men, which I didn't think was good either, but I now see women and children. I came out of my house a week ago and found a man asleep in his car. It was clear to me that he was living in the car.
What's caused that, do you think? Why the increase in...
Rents go up, purchase of housing go up, jobs go down, or the amount paid for a job, so that you can't, even if you work hard, and there's been stories in the papers in Portland, two members of a family working and still not able to afford decent housing for themselves and several children. So any slip, any sickness, any closure of a small plant or a small service provider means a person out of work. And if two can't keep it going, one certainly can't. That's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is we have done this whole deinstitutionalization thing where we don't want people in our mental institutions, and we've left them on the street with very little resources, and we're going to take some more of those resources away too. So a lot of the people who live on the street are not there through their own volition.
What do you think the answer is? You and I are both from St. Louis, where there have been some pretty dramatic years ago failures of large public housing projects, but there have been others that have been very successful. What do we need to turn to today to solve the problem of the homeless?
You know, when I looked at Carr Square Village, and you're familiar with Carr Square Village, which was an area that had two-story, single-family living units, and everyone could feel like they had their own little front yard and their own little backyard. And when I went to college, I met lots of young people from Carr Square Village. I didn't meet any from the high-rise, the cement and steel edifices that made you feel as though you were going to prison when you went home. So one is to put the human values into buildings. Buildings are for people. They are not for the sake of the buildings. That's an important thing to do. The other is to recognize that we will always have with us people who cannot participate as fully as we might like in our society. So we accommodate them. We build decent housing for them. They don't have to live in bad places. We can build places now with our technology, with our skills, that will let people live for little money in fairly nice places. The other issues have a lot to do with child care, elder care, because women work, women raise children, and they also take care of the old people. Now, if I've got to pay all that, I can't afford a place to live. And so I'm despondent when I live on the street, and I don't like my life.
Being your friend for a number of years, Kathleen, I know so many great qualities about you, and one of your loves is in the field of children and children's needs, and you just spoke to that. I want to tie that to the whole issue of prejudice and bigotry, which is so much with us yet. Many people have struggled to try to find ways to eliminate and reduce prejudice and bigotry. And you speak often of hope. Is our hope in eliminating prejudice and bigotry with the children?
Oh, definitely, Tony.
What can we do to make sure that the next generation of children have somewhat obviously different experience than those of the past?
I'm trying to remember the name of the musical that had a song in it about you have to be carefully taught to hate. And so let's not teach hatred. Let's teach only love. Let's teach connectedness. Let's teach about how it is that we may be different, but more than that, how it is that we are similar and the same. Children are very accepting of one another until they are humiliated or castigated into being rejecting of other people. Children just like people because they're nice people. And then somebody tells them, you don't like that person because they are X. And it's mommy and daddy who have the control. And if mommy and daddy have said this, then I have to do it. I don't have any choice. So I have to learn to not like. Let's just stop that right now. Let's make sure that in the school books we see faces of different colors. Let's make sure that when we are reading to our children, we're giving them information. Let's make sure that we're taking our children to places where they can see people who are different from them, where they can hear music that is not of this culture in particular, but of lots of different cultures. The more we expose the children, the more tools we give them with which to think. And that makes them more creative. And that can be a lot more fun living.
On that very positive note, I have to bring our program to conclusion, and I want to say on behalf of the panel to you, Kathleen Sadat, thank you for this program, for the contributions you've made to North Idaho with your address during our 6th annual Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Thank you for having me, Tony.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know you've enjoyed our program. It has been a special one, discussing the principles of Dr. King, and also, as I indicated at the beginning of the program, we've taken this opportunity today to celebrate the 900th airing of the North Idaho College TV Public Forum. We're so pleased to have been with you so long, and we want to thank all of our people at North Idaho College and in our state for their support, and we certainly want to thank KSPS TV Channel 7 in Spokane, who have been so supportive of us over the many years that we have come to you, and we look forward to continuing that relationship in the future. Please have a good week and join us next week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.